Government.
I call the Honourable Member Sua William Seo.
Thank you.
Malo soifua.
Malo soifua, Mr. Chairman. Good to be in the House to further have these discussions around the Environment Canterbury Temporary Commissioner's Improved Water Management Amendment Bill. As the House will be aware, this bill proposes a process that is at complete odds with the fundamental beliefs New Zealanders have regarding the importance of democracy and upholding the strong historic basis of our governance order, irrespective of whether it be local government or central government, the governance order that New Zealanders, the younger generation, have grown up with is a government by the people, of the people, for the people. This bill proposes to set aside for the second time in a row the basic and fundamental right of the people of Canterbury to hold free and democratic local body elections. The John Key National Government first took away the rights of the people of Canterbury in 2010 by forcing through the original piece of legislation. That legislation got rid of the then elected People's Representative on Environment Canterbury, and by force of that legislation replaced the People's Representative with 7 government-appointed commissioners. Again, by force through that legislation, the people of Canterbury continue to be taxed to pay for the government-appointed commissioners. And I recall, as many will, the people of Canterbury, this government sugarcoated that proposal by imposing on the people of Canterbury a promise that the people of Canterbury will have their democratic elections in 2013. That's this year. This government included that promise in that original act, the act, sir, that we now debate and its amendments. Now, the original promise, sir, was that the people of Canterbury will hold their democratic and free elections 2013. And now this government, this bill will now break that promise. Now, ordinarily, sir, if any hard-working citizen of our country, whether they be from the north or south, in this case the Canterbury people, if any citizen of our country breaks any law, whether it be traffic laws or otherwise, sir, the consequences, they are either impose a fine or a jail term. Yet this government will break this law, the original promise in 2010, by changing the legislation, by ramming through another piece of legislation and now saying, look, you're not going to hold your elections this year. Instead, you'll hold your elections in 2016. They're legal. I mean, this is the silly part of it. Ordinarily, any citizen breaking the law would be fined or thrown to jail. And yet, this government is able to get away by avoiding any consequential ramifications from breaking their legal promise and again imposing another promise by amending the original act to say that now Environment Canterbury and the people of people of Canterbury can only hold their local body elections in 2016. Sir, that sends a message that this government has forgotten about the people of Canterbury, has forgotten about the value of democratic rights, and they send a strong message. This government places no value on the rights of the people of Canterbury to be able to vote their own representatives. And the people of Canterbury will recall that the original act was rammed through this House by this government under urgency in a single day. New Zealanders weren't given the opportunity to have a say then, and least of all the people of Canterbury. And I suspect, sir, that because this government and none of the ministers have been able to say once and for all whether they intend to consult with the people of Canterbury with the changes that they are proposing, and particularly with the review that they are intending to bring in. And so the people of Canterbury, unfortunately, under this government, will have to continue to pay taxes without representation. Yet the government's own cabinet papers in 2010 stated that the deferral of the 2010 election should only be a temporary measure as it did not allow, and I quote, as it did not allow for the rights of the people to participate. In other words, this government were told to keep their promise in their own parliamentary papers to honour the promises, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
The Honourable Member, Sue Williams-Seo.
Their own cabinet papers advised them that they should honour their promise and the promise that the people of Canterbury can hold elections 2013. Those same cabinet documents explicitly state that the intent was to return to a democratically elected council as soon as the government-appointed commissioner's task was completed. In the cabinet papers on this amendment bill, we have both ministers, the Minister of the Environment, David Carter, and Amy Adams, Minister of Local Government, both state categorically clear that any option except a return to a fully elected council would limit the democratic rights of the people of Canterbury compared with the rest of the country and violate Article 25 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. In other words, sir, this bill means the government would be in breach of its commitment in the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights to protect, promote and fulfil the rights of people in New Zealand. And as the Human Rights Commissioner submitted in their submission to the Local Government Select Committee, the greater concern is how the government will justify their deliberate and determination to get rid of the rights of the people of Canterbury, a right many New Zealanders paid the ultimate sacrifice in the defence and protection of those fundamental rights which are now being cast aside by this bill being introduced by the government. My colleague, Grant Robertson, referred to the regulatory impact analysis, and I want to give acknowledgement to the Department of Internal Affairs and the Ministry of the Environment because it is a thorough analysis of this bill and the impact. They truly recognise that this analysis and the proposal by this government had no public consultation whatsoever. It is in their recommendation that public consultation take place. But we know from sad experience so far under the term of this government that they despise almost talking to the people who are going to be affected by their decisions. In the regulatory impact analysis, there are 5 options given. And the authors of this report recommend option 1. And option 1, sir, is the intention of option 1 is that ECAN will return to a fully locally elected democratic body under transitional plan. So here we have the advice from the 2 critical government departments advising the government on what they ought to be doing. And yet this government decides on option 3, legislation to extend or entrench. So despite the original advice given that this should only be a temporary measure, despite the promise of this government that 2013 is when they will hold election, despite the words of their ministers that it is best if they quickly hold elections so that they don't entrench this kind of behaviour, despite the recommendation by the authors of the regulatory impact analysis that they quickly return to fully locally elected democratic body, what this government does is it accepts option 3. Option 3 entrenches a governing body of appointed commissioners by this government. So I think the people of Canterbury, the message they will hear from this bill is they have been a forgotten public, they are forgotten Canterburyans, that their democracy, their rights to be able to elect their own local government representatives are being denied under this bill. And sadly, I have to say, in April of this year, this House will play host to a number of members of Parliament from across this region. It will include Fiji, amongst the other countries. And in addition to the debates that members of this House can participate in addition to some of the seminars that will be held, and in addition to us hearing from the members of Parliament from the Pacific, one of the aims of this forum is for us as a Parliament, New Zealand, to be able to share with our Pacific counterparts the importance of democracy. So I feel somewhat embarrassed because if any of those members of Parliament picks up on what this is happening.
Point of order, the Honourable Member, Louise Upston.
Thank you, Mr Chair. This title and commencement commenced last night.